Do you like resource management games? Do you like Catan? Well, what about my viewers who actually want to enjoy the board games that they play? Oh, you have a gigantic brain? And do you actually understand Agricola? That's cool. Well, what if I told you that I have a game that's very similar to both of them, and that's 1/3 the age of Agricola? It's easier, and it's better. What? No, it's not. God, it's not Peggle, okay? Stop with that. It's not funny. Ugh. The second chunker is called Scythe. I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag. This game fucking slaps. It does everything shy of kicking your childhood bully in the teeth. This game is designed by Jamie Stegmaier and illustrated beautifully by Jacob Rosalski. And it's published by my favorite board game publisher of all time, Stonemaier. Stonemaier makes other absolute banger board games like Wingspan and Tapestry. I actually can't stress that enough. If you see a game with the little SM Stonemaier logo on it, fucking buy it. That's not a joke. This isn't some haha funny, they make Peggle joke type shit. Buy their games. Like, seriously. Also, spoiler, I will be comparing this to Agricola a lot instead of Catan. So if you are somehow familiar with Agricola and not familiar with Scythe, this is gonna make a lot of sense. Okay, let's move on to the lore. In Agricola, the game design was clearly thought of first, and then they said, like, fuck it, farm, dude. I don't know. You want to know the fucking lore to this bad boy, huh? Well. Resource management and the remnants of a post-World War I alternate timeline. Each faction worker on their knees, waiting for some brine. Scythe gameplay really rocks. Okay, so if you weren't following the world's worst Ram Ranch parody, let me give you the lowdown, because I really do enjoy the world building in this game. So, it's post-World War I, alternate timeline Europa. There's a city-state that's in the middle that's simply known as the Factory, that has since shut down since the war. Warmongers from different countries all take notice of this, and, they want what's up for grabs. The Factory is responsible for fueling the war with mechs and innovation, and nobody really knows what it holds until you get there. With only one way to win the game, there are 210 ways to get there. That doesn't even count the character-specific ways to further increase those numbers. The actions that you take as faction leader shape the outcome of the world. Each player basically LARPs as one of the 5 faction leaders of Eastern Europe, and you attempt to earn your faction's stake in the unclaimed land by means of money, resources, battle, artillery, being popular, enlisting draft dodgers, gaining villagers and workers, building structures, and finally by unleashing fucking mechs onto the world. That's right, they just said fuck it, super fighting robots. Each player starts out with different resources and abilities that are based on their leader's past life before the events of the game. Some are like super rich, others are just great swimmers, some are good at building certain things, others were sent on a quest and have slightly more objectives. Despite all this, Scythe gives players complete control over their fate. Hardly anything is actually mitigated by luck or just randomness. Now's probably a good time to move on to the gameplay mechanics in the piece review. So, you may have immediately noticed, this didn't fit on top of my board game chest that I use as a coffee table, right? This is a futon that I put my Cuban flag table on top of, that I use in all of my videos to show you just how massive this board game is. In fact, if you have the expansion that moves it up to 7 players, this is only half of the board. You flip it over and you add the other board that's included in the expansion. It is insane. This game also has a billion pieces on top of it. Size matters when it comes to your playing space because you will be utilizing all of it as a group and your own personal space and actions. Did I mention that the base game is 1 to 5 players? Yeah, that's right. You can solitaire it up, my dude. I'll leave the solo play up for you to explore, but basically you draw cards to act as the opponent, and the action that they perform on the card that's drawn is based on your previous move. This is known as the Automa Factory, and it's used in other board games, like Wingspan and Black Angel. Each game of Scythe also takes about 2 hours, so it's a pretty big time sink. Each player is dealt a random faction leader, their leader's bonus board, and a move board. The move boards dictate what everyone starts with and what actions your characters can take in what order. These boards work in such a way that you pick the top action, and if you have the requirements to complete it, complete the bottom action. This leads to many different ways that you can play the game. You can enlist and get bonuses for what the people next to you do. This in particular is amazing because it makes you pay attention to what everyone around you is doing, and is actually unlike a lot of other board games, or even video games that are like board games like Mario Party, where you're just waiting for your turn or waiting for a collective thing that everybody has to do. Each of the boards also comes with these divots, which are fucking amazing. It's intuitive to where you place everything, you know, like round peg, round hole, dodecahedron peg, dodecahedron divot. One of my favorite mechanics is actually upgrading. Upgrades allow you to move one cube from the top row to the bottom row. This makes your actions more effective and your bottom actions less costly. It speeds up the game tremendously, and the name of the game is definitely Momentum. It's kind of, people compare it, they say it's an engine building like game. That's just, I mean, that's fine, that's like deck building, right? Except every single turn you get to do the cool thing, right? Like you, once your actions get better and once your moves get upgraded, you can just, I mean, everything just builds. You're just going up until the point where it stops. Another great mechanic is actually deploying workers. At first, producing things is free, but the more workers you have on the field, it starts to cost resources. And not resources like food, oil, or wood, like the ones that they're producing, but things that societies actually have to pay workers, like popularity, battle power to protect them, or money. You know, one really cool thing is the dynamics of the pieces themselves. So like, yeah, there are certified metric fuck ton of pieces in this game. But you want to know which ones can engage in combat? Well, that sounds like a really big problem, doesn't it? Nope, it's just the plastic ones. That's it. It's that easy. Speaking of which, let's look at the plastic pieces. Each character has a companion animal, and they all look sick as hell. Another nice attention to detail here is that there are personalized mechs for each color, meaning that every character's mechs looks different from each other despite them just already being different colors, which I think is just a really nice touch. These pieces are made so well. Everything in this game is like crafted by people who have played board games. I mean, it was on Kickstarter for a very long time. It was the most hyped game of 2015. It finally released in 2016, and it really does live up to the hype, right? One last attention to detail is that the plastic bags are perforated. This allows air to flow through them, so you don't, this keeps you from having to like burp the bags where you push the air out of it, so you can actually close it so that everything fits back into the box. These small things on top of the excellent game design is really what makes it stand out. You heard me mention the factory, TM, a lot earlier. Only your specific faction leader can interact with it, and when you do, you get to choose whatever card you want from the factory card pile. This is placed next to your board and counts as another move you can take, but you gotta be quick. The pile is limited, so you might get stuck with a less than stellar 5th move. Your faction leaders can also interact with these encounter tokens, which let you pick up cards and read out the perks. This is where I'm going to point out the amazing artwork done for this game. Each card has some beautifully illustrated stuff on it, and you know, the world building events underneath it really drive it home. Some of them are straight to the point, like relieve the soldiers of some of their dead weight, and you buy their resources off of them. Others are fun and goofy, like you save the cow by distracting the mech that's targeting it by yodeling. Yeah. These cards also have numbers at the top. These don't mean anything for the game at all. I know that seems like it could be pretty confusing, but they are references so that if you wanted to look up, say, Scythe encounter card number 24, you could find the plain artwork provided by the publisher, or even ask them questions about the card on their website or their forums. These illustrations that are found online are super high quality, and they're good enough definitely to be phone or even desktop backgrounds to boot. If there is one thing this game has, it's a shit ton of rules and a lot of mechanics. I know that sounds overbearing, but the upside is that once you learn all of the rules, or you play your first game and you learn along the way, you're never going to need to look up anything ever again. All the mechanics are pretty straightforward. There are just a lot, and I mean a lot. This isn't a how-to or let's play, so I'm not even going to go over things like objective, movement, combat, battle cards, bolstering, popularity multiplier, popularity meter, resource management, in and out of battle, worker movement, development, mech deployment, structure building, special movement like tunnels, lakes, and mines, or character-specific powers that override the general game rules, etc. This isn't a let's play, but if you wanted to see perhaps the most succinct and informative how to play videos, I recommend you watch It Played Scythe tutorial. There will be a link in the description down below. That channel also has a video on how to play the Wind Gambit expansion that I'm actually going to go over right now. Holy shit, these airship pieces are immaculate. The extra cards like movement and extra objectives are all made out of board. They're just quality game pieces, as expected of Scythe and Stonemaier. There's also a Invaders from Afar expansion that I don't personally own, but it adds 2 more player slots, which brings the totals up to 7, but that's not all it does. It adds a lot of kick-ass rules, like you can set traps or control whole areas in a new way that's definitely fresh and actually game balancing. Instead of the other way around, like expansions tend to be. I thoroughly enjoy them, and I would advocate that you buy these if you already own the base game. Okay, so just an aside, board game nerds are like the coolest. They make the coolest shit I see all the time. I see stuff for Stonemaier games in particular online all the goddamn time. For instance, people make custom tokens and 3D printed pieces for resources and workers in this game, and for other Stonemaier games like Wingspan, they make custom dice rollers and even custom food pieces for the birds. It beats the hell out of like the 3D printed plastic piece holders for Splendor. Oh, and while I have your attention, speaking of Splendor, I have an obligation to inform you that they now have a Marvel version of Splendor, featuring, you guessed it, Thanos. Each of the gems that you can collect is an Infinity Stone, which is pretty wild when you think about it, that there's just that many Infinity Stones up for grabs. It's a very weird flex/cash grab, you know? Scythe is also available on Steam. If you don't have room for this game, which I can't imagine a lot of people do, I would recommend this. This is published by Asmodee, who's one of the big name publishers who make stuff like Splendor. The online version is $20 only, and the DLC at the time of the publishing of this video included is $25.48. The Steam version has a surprisingly positive set of reviews. I've seen a lot of board game adaptations go sour, like Splendor or even early access Gloomhaven. This game just has so much to offer. I think it's a must-have for people who already know that they just love board games. Before I get to the ratings, though, I have to recommend a drink. You know how it is. So for this game, I'm definitely recommending a beer, and I don't mean like a Busch or some local IPA. To really capture the essence of this game, beer is really the only fitting beverage. I mean, for a while, beer was just super low ABV, and because of this was the main drinking source since a lot of local water was contaminated or just bad to drink, especially around the time that this is set in. Being in Europa, I figured that we should go with none other than an award-winning beer from Iceland called Einstök. I'm a huge fan of their white ale. It has just the right amount of citrus for a wheat ale. It's a classic, Belgian wit beer that's accented by coriander and orange peel. It has just the right zing with more bitterness and hops than something like a Blue Moon, but not too much. If you want hops, I would suggest their IPA that they make as well, but the wheat ale is the one I'm recommending for this board game. So, on to the ratings. Difficulty-wise, I'm giving this one exactly a 3.25 out of 5. That is because if you were to tell me if you thought it was a 3, or if you think it's a 3.3, a 3.5 out of 5, I'm not going to argue with you, right? This game is difficult, and just the amount of time from unboxing to actually being on the table and playing the game is a very long time. Setup and cleanup take a long time just because of how much there is going on. All those mechanics that I mentioned earlier also have like their own specific rule sets and exceptions. I would say the time to learn the mechanics well enough to play the game is anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. But like I said, when you know what you're doing, it's there, you're good to go. It's worth it. For comparison, I would say Agricola is slightly harder. Again, if you're familiar with that game and haven't come across Scythe somehow, or if you've played Scythe and you want to know more about Agricola, that should be helpful. I love this game to pieces. I hope that's been clear. And what better way to follow up the worst board game I've ever played, the Pantone review up here, than with one of the best games that I've ever played. I'm giving Scythe a solid 8.5 out of 10. For all intents and purposes, I would treat this as like a 9 out of 10 for this channel. It's a top 5 board game for me, for sure. And I'm just keeping those higher numbers available, just in case I come across games that are better than this. I sure hope I do, because I would love to play another board game as good as this. The expansions I would rate highly as well, especially for games as successful as this. It wasn't a cash grab. They play tested it. It was thought out. It adds fun and complexity to an already amazing game. This publisher, and you're going to hear me talk about them a lot, is actually hit or miss on expansions. For instance, I wouldn't say that the European expansion for Wingspan is worth it, but I would say that both expansions are wonderful for Scythe. This comes in part from the creators, not the publishers, though. There's not really a lot that you could add to Wingspan, but this isn't a Wingspan review. I promise it's coming. I promise that's another fantastic board game. We're going to go over it. I promise. So, we're finally through it. Did you enjoy the review? Have you played Scythe before? What do you want to see next? There's probably a poll on my Twitter right now that you can participate in to decide the next review that I do. It's going to be in the link in the description down below. And thanks, and I'll see you guys in the next one.